It is truly an honor to introduce someone I deeply admire, both professionally and personally. Christina Veira is the kind of person whose presence shifts a room. Not because she's the loudest voice, but because she speaks with purpose, clarity, and an unwavering commitment to making our industry better, more inclusive, and more thoughtful. She's the co-owner of Bar Mordecai in Toronto, a 2-story love letter to the hospitality, art, and resilience. Opened just weeks before the world shut down, Bar Mordecai didn't just weather the storm, it built community through it. It's now recognized on the 50 Best Bars North America list year after year. And it reflects everything Christina touches: style, substance, and soul. But the bar is just one part of her story. Christina is also the founder of Stave, a school that reimagines beverage education by centering real people, real stories, and real access. She's a WSET educator, a mentor, a fierce advocate for equity. She has also served as National Coordinator of Speed Rec Canada. A little biased. Where her leadership has elevated the entire landscape of competition and care. Additionally, she's curated the bar and beverage experience for the Restaurants Canada show since 2018, served as a director of programming for Toronto Cocktail Week, and even contributed to international cultural exchanges like the Alamori Gymna program. Terrified to say that wrong. In Okinawa, Japan, where I was born, which is why I was terrified to say it wrong. And the industry has noticed. She's been named one of Drinks International's Bar World 100 most influential figures 5 years running. She is a Roku industry icon, Canada's 100 Best Bartender of the Year, an IWSC Future 50 Under 40, and of course, the recipient of this year's International Sales Council. Incredible impact she continues to make. But beyond the titles and accolades, what stands out most to me is Christina's heart. Her integrity, her ability to hold space for others, especially those too often overlooked. She reminds us that hospitality isn't just about service, it's about stewardship, about showing up for people, about creating change that lasts. So please join me in giving your full love and attention to someone I am endlessly grateful to know and learn from, the incomparable Christina Veira.
The brightness, because I have terrible eyesight. But perfect. All right, cool. Thanks, everyone. This is such an honor to receive, and I very much appreciate that Lucy got all of the thank yous out of the way. So ditto. And I'll just add a couple more in there as well. I public speak. I'm a naturally shy person, which you don't always get because I do a lot of education, I do a lot of speaking. But part of the reason why I'm a lot better at it than I should be is because I did public speaking in high school and university. I really love people, and I think all of us in the room probably really love people, not being around people. And it was a really good way to find ways to connect with people so that you didn't show up all the way your worst. But as a slight relation to that, I never really talk about myself. So this will be a very beautiful and lightly uncomfortable for me but it'll be good anyway. All right, so let's hit it. So thanks for, I feel like when you get awards, you should always be really proud of yourself, but when they list the accolades, you're just like, oh, everyone's like, gonna think I'm a douche when I go up there. I really am thankful for the prompts, and I actually am very thankful to be here right now. It's a bit bittersweet that very few Canadians, I mean, I have some of the loudest ones in the room with me right now. Probably proportionate to population size, we're actually probably still okay. But it is bittersweet because while I feel like there is a lot I have done in my career for the industry, a lot of it has been a love letter to either my city or my country. So not being able to have a lot of people for reasons which I'll probably touch on, but also we all know, is a bit sad. And it does change even what it felt like to choose to accept the award. To accept the award meant to come to the States. To come to the States means also having a lot of conversations with everyone within our industry in Canada, just about if it was ethical, what we were co-signing, if it made sense, and if it was safe. And one of the interesting things about safety is safety moves from bodies to bodies. And one interesting thing interesting to me, I would tell people, is like, I don't know if you ever should have thought I was fully safe going to the States as a Black woman, and I don't know if you can truly tell me that right now I'm actually much more safe than when I went 2 years ago when you felt safer. And I think it's and to that point, I think it's really great that we have conversations like this. I think it's really great that we have awards like this. But I think it's really great that we also always push levels of talking, of being lightly uncomfortable with each other, and also using that discomfort, not necessarily only to make people uncomfortable, but to make it to expand community and to put more people in the same space. So, where did I start? So I chose, or actually here, no, who am I? That picture of me on the right I chose because I look great. And it's in the same family, at least in Canada. Glenlivet's very wrong brand, not 40. But the interesting thing about this photo shoot, I mean, it's in my bar, it's in Bar Mordecai. But the photo shoot actually happened in, I want to say, beginning of November or end of October in 2020. So we opened at Bar Mordecai. Technically, January 26th was our soft open. January 29th was our real open. And as you all know, basically by March 16th, almost everywhere, March 16th, 17th, almost everywhere was completely shut down, at least for a couple of weeks and not much longer. In Ontario, where Bar Mordecai is based, Ontario and Quebec had some of the longest lockdowns, so I think when I counted up Ontario's, give or take, between 2020, our last lockdown ended, I want to say February 4th, 2022. We had about 440 days of no inside dining. That doesn't include also all the different restrictions we had before, during, and after. And again, dining is an interesting thing in a climate that can often be cold and by design, and also what the costs add to function. So this shoot was done just after the second lockdown announcement. I didn't actually join Bar Mordecai until around August 2020. I was there, weirdly, during the soft open and working and the official open because I was fully freelance and self-employed at the time. So before COVID, and this is like a bit of a theme, but before COVID, I was a spirits and hospitality educator. I did a lot of consulting. I would pay my rent through basically consulting with XM agencies in Canada because it looks a bit different up there than it does down here. I worked with things like Toronto Cocktail Week, things like RC Show and beyond, and I slowly built up what was like a pretty cool career for myself. I was pretty struggle bus, honestly, until that time, because being an entrepreneur isn't fun, but it was actually kind of interesting that when lockdowns happened, it wasn't as mentally, financially upsetting to me because I'd gone through that whole, like, I'd been just about thinking I was going to be good. I was like, all right, well, maybe I'll never be good. I joined the bar in, again, like August 2020. It was around when we were finally able to reopen for indoor. And in that time period, my business partners, Em and Josh, who are right next to me, who are two of my best friends, and two people I owe a lot of beautiful things in my life to. They had another bar, but that bar, their business partner, who was also one of their close friends, they basically decided to split the bars. And in splitting the bars, offered me a partnership in the bar, because this Bar Mordecai had potentiality, and they didn't know how big it could go. It actually we hadn't completed the build, and they decided to choose that one in splitting the businesses, and just kind of do a big risk. And then we had this conversation in the park, and I said, sure. I thought about it. I didn't say sure in the park, but I spiritually said sure in the park. And it's been amazing. It's been really cool. But I'd actually given up on owning a bar or a bricks and mortar before then. I found, and I still do, find bricks and mortar bars in the bar hospitality industry incredibly hard. It's incredibly hard as a woman. It's incredibly hard and draining as a Black woman. And despite many of the accolades and all the certifications and everything I'd had before, I kept hitting weird walls when trying to get certain types of jobs. I wasn't getting offered what other people were offered, and so I did other things, and I ended up getting really cool jobs and roles, and I basically built something for myself, and I started to really love it. But I did give up on what was originally my dream of having a bar, and it's always bittersweet that the reason I have a bar, and they hate when I say this, but it is kind of true, is because of a terrible worldwide event, which is COVID. And it is an incredibly humbling fact. It also means that, like, the first couple of years of having a bar, I couldn't invite all my friends and family to come see it. It is the least sexy time to train people. It was the least sexy time to have people. Everyone is traumatized. Your staff are traumatized, you're traumatized. And when I did Letters to a Young Bartender a couple years ago, I did mention that one of the other things, and this was actually right after, is you're not supposed to become good at firing people. I'm sure there's some like white guy business textbook that says that, but you're not supposed to become good at laying out people and rehiring them so often in a short amount of time, because you quickly realize that while the romantic vision is that you can always keep paying your staff, if your staff want to have a job and they want to have a business, sometimes the most compassionate thing to do is to find ways to protect the business so that they can still have that, not in the short term but the long term. And in some ways, and it's not always, but like being an entrepreneur, especially in hospitality, where I feel like so much of hospitality is care work, is an extension of care work if you do it in the right way. But that also means that it can also be quite exhausting, because you are teaching your staff how to care for people. You are finding ways to care for them. You're so deeply ingrained in what people are doing. And we're a big bar. Mordecai is a fun bar. And we're so much of a part of people's most special times, which means that we carry so much of their emotional energy as well. And it is exhausting, and I understand why it's exhausting for people, and the emotional burnout is real as well. But why do I decide then, or why did I decide to get into, I guess, what I would call, like monetary care work, fun care work, as opposed to just being a PSW or a nurse? So here is a couple of like pictures. Me all the way, I guess to your right, is kind of me now still. The top left corner, it's me, my parents, and my grandfather, Frank, also known as Mouse Frank. My parents are Jamaican. My mom moved to Canada in 1969. My dad moved in 1974. So, as I always say, while we are Jamaican and a lot of cultural, we bring things, I've always kind of bristled when people act like we're also not Canadian, because I'm like, my mom and my dad have basically their entire adult lives only contributed to this country. So what are you talking about? My grandfather in the middle, I'll tell you one quick anecdote, which will also tell you a lot about me. So he came from, he's mixed. He came from a family where his mom, Mimi, and his father, Anthony. His father came from a pretty rich, what we were told was like a Portuguese family, but also it turned out eventually, like when we did some genealogy stuff, like through cousins, like just searching records, that they were actually an older like Portuguese Jewish family that had moved to Jamaica but then kind of hid it. They kind of pretended to be Methodist, and it made sense because they were terrible Methodists. And so when his father had married my great grandmother, our branch of the family was disowned. Because they were black. But as the family had, I guess, died off at that time in Jamaica, especially in, I guess, like the 60s, the government would just reclaim all your property. And they owned a big stretch, like close to Mobe, where a lot of the resorts are. And then they called my grandfather into a meeting, and they basically offered him to, I guess, inherit at least a lot of it. And he told them to go fuck themselves. And my dad always brings it up as a very annoying story. And the first time he told me that, I was like, I would do the same thing. So if you wonder why I'm weirdly stubborn, it comes from a long line of stubborn people. But it would be nice to own resorts. The bottom was just me, probably doing what I would still like to do, playing with puzzles, very introspective, very in my little world. And the one in the middle is important for a couple of reasons. The first reason is hilarious. I am scared of a clown. So this is at church. My mom worked at a church my whole life. There's a clown in the Sunday school area, and I was so terrified that I ran upstairs. Also, I grew up in a church. I grew up being that little annoying kid that was always setting up the refreshments, that always had my mom's keys, that always helped lock up, that always helped do all the dinners, that always helped doing all those things. And I'd say that while I'm not religious, more spiritual than religious, I owe a lot of my thoughts about hospitality and community to growing up in a pretty big, active, and quite loving church overall. I was originally more of an older Newfoundlander, Scots-Irish immigrant church that somehow over 30 years became deeply Caribbean and Filipino. So my aunt June Winnie in the background is one of my godmothers as well. And I had an aunt May who was like very Newfie. Who was basically like my mom's like Canadian mother, who would like make me new stew and all those things. And so I think that kind of basis, I think of bars and hospitality spaces as like versions of churches. I think of sometimes, honestly, some of our seminars as versions of testimony that may be going on too long and not researched. But I think that all of it kind of very much related. And I also think that people need those spaces as well. I think it's very important. I think that, and we'll get into like the work I've done and blah, 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 but I think that we lose a lot of the plot when we stop to see our bars and our spaces as part of our community, and being part of our community can be a lot of different things. But bars, even more so than restaurants, are typically quite accessible places, and I think that they should be quite accessible. People do a lot of important conversations, and anytime someone goes into a hospitality space, they are choosing for someone to do something for them. And when you can do that even remotely well, which could just be pouring the water at the right time, sometimes people just need to feel a touch of some act of service or love. I'm not great at most of the love languages, but I feel like I'm very acts of service. I care about caring for people. And I remember even when I worked in financial district in Toronto and everyone was so cursed when they came in, you would literally watch everyone slowly relax. Like, they'd be so terrible for the first part of the interaction, and then by the end, they would relax, and I realized it's because they just needed someone to care for them for a bit, and we get to do that all the time. So I think anytime that we can expand that, and expand what we think of community, and expand all that more, that's where we can do a lot of beautiful work, and that's where a lot of our pride should come from in the work that we do. Also, sometimes we make money. So we had a couple prompts. I can't look at you. Okay. So we had a few prompts, right? And again, I said I don't love talking about myself. But for everyone, like COVID was a very disrupting influence. And because we had so many lockdowns, because things changed all the time, because news was so crazy then. It's actually crazier too. For context, in Canada, we don't even get news on Facebook and Instagram anymore. So we could at the beginning of COVID, we can't now, which means that there's a lot of disinformation that does take place. So during COVID, when I got Roku Industry Icon, I kind of thought it was weird. I didn't expect it, but they don't tell you, but I also didn't expect it. And a lot of people didn't know who I was, when they announced the name, or they announced what it was. And I was trying to think of why that would be. I went in 2022 and there wasn't a lot happening, and sure my bar was on the list, but what's a bar? And what's a bar in Canada during that time? But I did spend a lot of time, especially online, and alongside a lot of other people, really trying to give a lot of information. But I also did something that started once, and then it became bi-weekly, and then it became monthly, and it was called In My Feelings. And it was kind of a result of watching everyone, and God bless us all, in the first few weeks of COVID, almost aggressively hustling, and aggressively doing these happy hours, and aggressively doing all these things, and almost needing to show that we weren't useless, that just because our industry didn't exist, we weren't losers. There's things going on. And it wasn't just our industry, right? It's you watch Hollywood performers singing Imagine, and you're grow up. But we were all doing that, and all of our Facebook and Instagram memories when they pop up from 4 or 5 years ago are alarming. But what I started doing was I do this thing called In My Feelings, and it was something that really helped me, and really helped, I feel a lot of people. And it was just a Zoom, and anyone could come in, and we could just talk about how we were feeling. And it could be great things, it could be bad things, it could be whatever. But so much of the way that we were all relating to each other during COVID was so almost linked into productivity in this very awful way, and it didn't allow space for even grieving. For example, I think even with a lot of my friends, we don't grieve even just the time we lost during certain parts, right? I'm 38, and a lot of that, including having the bar and what that looks like, has changed what my life would have been like before. And we don't always open that up because we always have to focus on the next thing and the next big one. And I think to that point, I think vulnerability is something that, and softness is something that we don't really encourage in women of color, especially in Black women. It's something that I aspire to. I aspire to be softer. I aspire to live in that more. And I aspire to create more space where people accept that, and to be okay with people not accepting that. And I think one thing that we also should do in the industry, regardless of our demographics, in that vulnerability is also share a lot more with each other. In that we don't share, say, things pay wages, for salary people. The white guys don't share it with each other either. We keep a lot of information because of ego, because of pride, because we also all probably make a lot of mistakes and we don't want people to know. And in doing that, we don't help each other. And there's different ways that I think, and Wade goes through all these things, how we can incorporate education, how we can incorporate vulnerability, and how we can incorporate sense of self and with each other, and really create that as a culture. It does help us be better at being more community-minded and understanding why it's so important. Because when everything is very rote, and when we lose that human aspect, while also trying to tell a 21-year-old bar back why it's so important to care for people, we have a disconnect. And that's why it is important, for example, to care for their learning, to care for their mentorship, to care for their pay, to understand that maybe our goal of professionalism in the industry is for everyone to be mediocre, which sounds really awful to say, but professions have mediocre people. And if you cannot have a space for what a job can look like, where people can be well compensated and take care of their families without conceiving it as people just being okay, then we will never actually have a process to have people actually have a way of life in our business. And that's not fun for me to think, when I'm at the bar, but it is true, and it is something that I try to use to in my version of touching grass. You can do the next one. So then I wanted to show just a few different things too. So to that point, I think that whenever you do events, parties, and most of what I have done, especially around fundraising, have been more events, parties, experiences. And that's probably because I don't know how to make like millions of dollars, but I do know how to get someone to spend $50 they didn't want. And what if they can spend that $50 they didn't want to spend and it goes to a charity? How can I make that go? And so around 2016, I think, actually before, so when I was at a bar, we used to do one Sunday where we'd give money to a student lunch program in the neighborhood. And basically what I would do is do different pieces around it and then just even talk to people. I was like, all right, $1 from this, basically just one kid's meal. So basically we sponsored like a grade 3 class. And it made people feel this like really tangible connection. It was also eventually easier to talk about harder subjects because people had something tangible, and then you could almost like feed into it a bit more. So one fun one that I do need to bring back is Jiggle Ball.
Yes!
Jiggle Ball was a Jello shot competition, and it raised quite a bit of money for women's shelter.
Wow.
Anchoring in something fun and silly, I always make sure, every charity, if I do something with alcohol, I always make sure they're okay with it. But anchoring in something fun and silly also enabled me to have different conversations with people. I did a lot for Nelly's before COVID especially, so those very Toronto looking boys with the diapers, that was from the baby shower themed event I did. So to get in, you had to either bring diapers or formula or $10. And then it was like a brunch themed party. And the interesting thing about that was how many people actually realized how expensive formula and diapers were. Because everyone was like, I'll just go with formula and diapers. Like, I think you got a free mimosa or something like that. And then they'd be like, holy fuck, this is like $30. How do people afford it? We donated the formula and the diapers to the women's shelter, also the money to the women's shelter. And because at the beginning of doing the events, I had a hard time getting, especially for the women's shelter, a lot of brands to donate. Not every brand, Dave's always been amazing. But because they felt that there's a very waspy perception that alcohol is the prime driver of people being in women's shelters, and especially in Toronto. That is actually not true. In fact, many of the women in the women's shelters come from cultures that do not drink. The women's shelter we chose, Nelly's, allows all women, so trans women, older women, women with mobility issues, and women with children. That's also rare for women's shelters. So all of those things allowed conversations to happen, allowed people to talk about it, and also allowed, still there's DJs, still there's fun, but allowed people to feel good about doing something while learning, and made it also, if they didn't care, they still could have, say, Jello shots or a mimosa. In the juice, that was for the Toronto Cocktail Conference for their closing party. That went to Toronto's Foundation for Student Success, so again, student lunches, and that one was dedicated to Fernando Castillo. And again, could talk about a few different issues in the lead up as well during the actual event. And also, you can see it a bit, I always post exactly what we do in real time, and I usually try to link it with something really tangible. So the one on the right, our anniversary party, we don't charge money at the bar. It is open bar, you pay a cover, and all the money that goes straight to charity, and we do street health. So I did a few things with street health before. Street health is not a charity, it's a non-profit, and because it does a lot of actual transformative work. So street health, what we donated to is it basically goes to sleeping bags for people. Our anniversary was in January, so it's cold. Sleeping bags, toiletries, ID clinics. If you don't have a stable living, you probably also lose your IDs and things. And while we do have universal health care, you need ID to access most of it. So ID clinics are important, and they also do bad date clinics. And bad date clinics are because for street-involved people and sex workers, the police and generally, I'll say, and in Toronto, don't care. And so someone has to inform people of who is trying to hurt them and who's trying to kill them. And so it funds that. So having events like this, where they are low cost and accessible, allows us to, one, tell our community where we stand without preaching at them. Not everything needs to be, if you see Bar Mordecai, you won't see we are like a majority woman, Black and Indigenous owned bar. But if you hopefully see different ways in which we try to move, you can at least see where we align. I do not care if we were to post something either individually or on the bar, and my business partners don't care if we do something and that meant that someone would no longer want to come to us, because realistically speaking, if we are trying to pander to like these people who want to take away rights from the people who come to our space, we are not creating a space for the people that we want to host, and we're not creating a safe place, and we're not seeing our community. And I think a lot of the times in a lot of these conversations where people talk about, is this too political or is this too whatever, it's like, no, it's like, who do you want to make feel welcome in your space? And who is a priority for you within your space? I don't think I'm that outspoken, which I know sounds crazy, because I don't necessarily want to say all the actual revolutionary stuff that's in my head. And I also don't think it's even bad from a business perspective. I think I'm biased. I live in a city that is, like, I think over 50% immigrant. It's over 50% people of color. I think our census says visible minority. And I don't think it's provocative to incorporate that into your business model. I think that even when people critique parts of like the bar or what have you, like we get people who look like Toronto. We get a lot of people that look like Toronto, and that might not look like a cocktail bar to a lot of people, but that's their problem because there's only so many there's only so many of a very specific genre of white man that can fill your bar. And our bar has 230 seats. So just on that basis, we need to have people come in. But it's crazy that when we have these conversations as an industry, like we just can't say that. Like we cannot say that especially in major cities with large like queer populations who are also in younger demographics, who are also, they should feel comfortable going out. Yes. They are also with disposable income. It's like, why should they feel less safe because you have this weird fantasy that your grandfather is gonna come in when he's maybe gonna come in? Like, he's not gonna be a regular, right? And it's like, so, I don't know. And that's like not able to be aware. Sometimes I just see the discourse, and especially in the States, sometimes I see the discourse and I'm like, what are we all doing? Because like, is this person gonna walk in? Is this person gonna be a regular? Do you like this person? Does this make sense for your business model? Why are we all arguing about this thing? Does it make more sense for you to expand what you think is community and protect your community? And to that point, as like Lucci also said, like that's also your staff. Like how you shouldn't have a space that is unsafe for your staff. And no one's perfect, and we're not perfect, but working every day towards being the boss you want to be, towards having more protections for people is really important. And like we have been able to offer things to our staff like benefits, like more flexible working hours, like things like that. And it's not easy. Like I have friends in this room that I talk to all the time where I'm like, no one talks about how expensive it is to run an ethical business. Like, and no one and no one asks your advice when you're like, but it's more expensive for me to do that than for me to just not pay people, like pay them, like underpay them, like under the table, throw them away, do these stages for 3 months. Like, I'm sorry, you should have a best bar. Like if I didn't pay, like if I had like 30 staff that I paid $3 an hour, like I should have an amazing bar. Like unfortunately that's not the structure I actually have, but like we have this weird shift in our industry that at the end of the day, like if I can contribute anything, and I think all of us do because conversations aren't with one person, I think it's just pushing forward this idea that like I think so many of us know what we want, and I think we know how we want to stand up, and I think a lot of it can be a lot easier than we think as long as we all really work together. And that's why I love, these are a lot of my older posters, but like that's why I love the small things we did, even if they seem like silly little parties or whatever, because they did impact people, like the patio day takeover on that went for birthday party funds because at the shelter people cell birthdays, and a lot of the kids didn't have birthday parties. And so it just went to that, and it raised a few $1,000s, and it basically meant that the kids could have birthday parties. Because children don't always know the situations they're in either. Jiggle Ball mostly raised money for Christmas presents for the kids in the shelter and within the shelter system. One of the most beautiful things of also doing those events, to the point about like your community might look different than you think, is when I was doing so many for the shelter, almost the only people who ever told me that they had stayed in a shelter as a child were men. And especially men of like more like seemingly privileged backgrounds. And I think if I was saying on anything, I think one other thing when we talk about all this is like releasing ourselves from levels of shame. And that's not to say that they didn't feel some level of shame, but they also saw all the value in growing up and realizing they had been in shelters, but they had things like a birthday party. They didn't quite realize why they weren't at home, but they realized that they still found parts of joy. And statistically speaking, it couldn't only have been young boys, even who are coming to my parties that had been in shelters, but they were at least the ones who could grow up into adults who didn't feel like they had to carry the shame of communicating that and what that looked like. And even when we talk about, I think when we choose our charities sometimes, it's nice to see a lot of these bar events expand where we want to give money to, right? And it takes a lot of advocacy, right? If it is for bad day clinics, if it is for shelters, if it is for children's lunches. And I think what we all have to do is like be very clear that where people are right now isn't necessarily where they're all gonna be, but we don't have to carry the shame, and we are, generally speaking, in an industry where we are much closer to a lot of these people than we are from being apart from it. So when we try to separate ourselves from it, we are also separating ourselves from our community. And a lot of these people are also people we work with. A lot of people are these people that we love. And a lot of these things are also ways to like connect beyond with our community in general. I think our guests love seeing the connections we have. Our guests feel better about supporting us. They might be less likely to do a noise complaint. And all of those things put together, I think, help grow it. So I guess to wrap all of it kind of up, is one, I do want to thank you all for this. It means a lot, even if it doesn't feel like fully deserved. But if I feel like I can impact anything, and is that I feel like hopefully we all continue to do these conversations with each other. I think hopefully we all continue to work with each other to expand more who we choose to care for, and to find so much pride in the work that we do to care for each other. Thank you.